Welcome back to the podcast. This is Mo, and today I have a very, very wonderful, amazing guest. She is a survivor of not just one, but two cancers, one of the lymph nodes and the other of breast cancer. In 2009, she founded the Zambian Cancer Society, which is a non-profit organization that is founded on the belief that no one should face cancer alone. And they support everyone that has been affected by cancer, irrespective of age, gender. Their hope is their reason that is to give hope, inspire, and enrich the lives of cancer patients and their caregivers. She also established this to counter the silence, shame, and stigma, as well as isolation that often surrounds the disease. As you guys can know already from the people who brought on the podcast, how this can be quite isolating, especially for those in the motherland. She's a World Health Organization patient for patient safety champion and sits on several national and international committees on cancer and non-communicable diseases. She has received several accolades, including the Udie Soko support program named in her honor by the Midland Hospital, and she's also an I Am Equal International Women's Day Award. Wow, there's still more, guys. Hold on for a bit. She holds a BA in Public Administration and a Chartered Secretary qualification. She's a certified breast health educator and a health and fitness lifestyle advisor. She recently co-authored a book titled Passionately Striving in Why, an anthology of women who persevere mightily to live their purpose. She's an avid 5-kilometer runner and a fledgling golfer. She's also a founding member of Eagles Toastmasters Club. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Miss Udie Soko to the podcast. Wow.
Thank you so much, Mo, for having me.
Wow, that's just...
It's great.
I mean, thank you. That's just... What a purposeful life. I mean, your life is just purposeful. So let's just start from the very beginning. I mean, so I know you're from Zambia, right? Can you just walk us through maybe how you grew up, your family, and and then we can go from there.
Yes, I am Zambian, but the interesting part is I was born in Washington, D.C., the United States, obviously, as where Washington, D.C. is. My father was Zambia's first ambassador to the United States. Zambia got independence in 1964, and a few months later, October, November, he was posted to America. And the following year, I was born. And well, that might not be, like jaw dropping. What might be for you, Mo, and the people listening today, is the fact that I was born on the day that Ian Smith was Zimbabwe's, at that time it was Southern Rhodesia's last
Prime Minister. Yeah.
Prime Minister.
Wow.
So on the 11th of November 1965, he declared a unilateral Declaration of Independence, UDI in short, declaring independence from the British. So my father, who was an ambassador, he was Zambia's first ambassador, and came from the eastern part of the country, who are renowned for naming their children, naming their children after momentous events.
I see where this is going.
Named me UDI. So I'm relaying this story as my mother shared. So when he went to see her at the hospital and he said to her, guess what has happened? And she said, what? Ian Smith has declared the Unilateral Declaration of Independence, UDI. So we're naming our daughter UDI. And my mother, in her wisdom, she suggested to him that he adds an E to make it a name, UD, rather than just letters, UDI. And he agreed to that. However, if you look at my birth certificate, it's written UDI Soko. So that's
that is very interesting.
And I spent my early years in the diplomatic service, or as a child of a diplomat, of an ambassador. My father served in the United States, in the then Soviet Union,
Russia,
now Russia, the territories, Kenya, and the United Kingdom. Right. Then I came back to Zambia, 1969, 1970, and then I began my school life up to high school and then university. Then I started work.
You're like the second person on the show who's lived a diplomat life. Mulongo Mochilemba, her father's also a diplomat, and she's Zambian as well. She's traveled around the world. So you're the first child and the firstborn. Do you have siblings?
Oh, I'm actually the last
you're the last one.
Well, I did mention that. Yeah, I had 3 brothers and a sister. So over the years, I have lost the firstborn, my brother, and the thirdborn.
So sorry
sister.
to hear.
So I now have just 2 brothers.
Sorry to hear.
And myself, I'm the last one.
So let's just fast forward because we're here today to kind of explore your life story. So you are a 2-time cancer survivor. And I hate to ask this question like a case of which one came first, the chicken or the egg. Which was the first diagnosis? Was it the one of the lymph node or the one of the breast cancer?
My first cancer diagnosis was cancer of the lymph nodes in 1989. I had just finished university and I was 23 years old and I had recently started work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And in fact, I started work in 1988. I finished university in 1987, started work in 1988. And in 1989, I was diagnosed with cancer of the lymph nodes.
Oh, wow. And that's the lymph nodes actually very, very important because it can actually affect other areas of your body, like the spleen, the thymus gland, and the bone marrows. How was your recovery? And given that you were in your 20s, then I imagine it was a difficult time for you.
Absolutely. First of all, I didn't even understand the gravity of what I was suffering from. Cancer was not a common disease then in Zambia. And, here, okay, I have cancer. And so what's the treatment? That's the next logical question. And I was told, yes, it can be treated. But the challenge was, at that time, Zambia did not have a cancer hospital. A few patients, maybe less than 100, maybe less than 50 even, were sent abroad. Well, some were lucky enough to be sent abroad for further treatment, either to Zimbabwe or South Africa or elsewhere. I tried to get onto that list. I wasn't fortunate. However, in my opinion, through God's divine intervention, I was working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and my employer sent me to Germany for treatment. And it was rough because, first of all, I was dealing with an illness I did not have any idea about. The treatment took over a year and it involved multiple treatments. It involved surgery. It involved what they call chemotherapy. These are anti-cancer fighting drugs. It involved radiation. And to top it all, I was living in a country where I did not understand the language. The culture was very different. The food. So there were a lot of shocks, hitting me at the same time, and including the fact that cancer treatment is painful at the best of times. Yeah, and recovering from surgery. So it was an assault on my body, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So it was quite a battle. But every day I was getting better, little by little, even through the rough times. There was an end goal that I was keeping my eyes set on. And after a year plus, I finally reached the finish line.
I mean, that's hard enough. Even because I work with cancer survivors, specifically prostate cancer, and I also look at not just men who are born in the U.S., but those who come from other parts of the world, like Caribbean countries and Africa. And you can tell that there's a difference when you're not in your home, like where your people are, because cancer is such a disease that attacks every part of you. You need that support. So I can't even imagine how difficult it was for you being in a different place without the comfort of your family and all of your psychosocial support to muscle through, but you did it, and I think it's a testament to your fighting spirit.
Yes, to a certain degree, I mean, I'm not saying I'm no hero. I just plodding through it a lot of times because, you feel so despondent because your body and soul are being, tossed left, right, and center. And fortunately, through the embassy, we managed to get my mother to come and be my primary caregiver. So she stayed with me for over a year. At that time, I think she was in her 50s. Now she's 84. And the staff at the Zambian embassy, I take off my hat to them for their support in different ways. The late ambassador, I mean, he would come and see me in hospital daily. And also the African community. I had a number of colleagues who would check up on me regularly. So that helped as well.
That's really good.
For sure.
So now let's fast forward a little bit to time. You also got diagnosed with breast cancer. How many years later from 1989, when you got diagnosed with lymph nodes, were you diagnosed with breast cancer?
Right. So in 1989, I had Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer of the lymph nodes. 1990, at some point, I was declared cancer-free. Fast forward to, and I was cured. Fast forward to 2015. The year I turned 50, my jubilee year, and I was so excited. And as I said earlier, I was born on the 11th of November, 1965. So it was countdown to my birthday. And Zambia had gotten independence in 1964. So it celebrated its jubilee year, in 2014. So there was all that hype, and I was saying, next year it's me. So a lot of plans for my birthday were being brewed. And what happens February, I believe it was February, March, through a routine checkup, I was told that I had breast cancer. And I was really blindsided because that was the last thing on my mind. It had been 26 years since cancer had last visited me unannounced, very unwelcome. And it shook me to the core. Yes, I'm a cancer advocate, but I believed my personal journey with cancer had been there and done it. Yes, it was over. And to be told I had breast cancer, was the last thing on my mind. And what that meant was now fighting again for my life. My birthday plans were put on hold. They weren't even important anymore. And it was now, what is the treatment regimen? To remove my breast, what they call a mastectomy, a full mastectomy. And I said, okay. And chemotherapy again and other treatments for a year. Literally, I was actually told 1 year. And then because of the type of breast cancer I had, I would be on hormonal therapy for 5 years, which is a pill that I was taking for 5 years. So that's what happened. And it wasn't easy. I mean, on the plus side, I received most of my treatment here in Zambia. I was diagnosed in South Africa, but I was able to receive most of my treatment here in Zambia because we now had a cancer hospital. And in 2015, it was still robust. Now it's had challenges since then, but it was still robust. I was able to get my treatment, and I was an outpatient. During my first first cancer, I was an inpatient, and it was very difficult. Yeah, so that was soothing.
What stage was your cancer diagnosed, and what receptors, what hormones were they receptive to? If you're at liberty to share.
Yes, I was diagnosed with early stage breast cancer. It was stage 2. And I tested positive for estrogen, so it was ER positive, and also tested positive for what they call
the last one.
I was HER2 positive.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, certain type of protein.
Okay, good.
Positive,
good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think kudos to you for even diagnosing that early, because what we're seeing right now, as I'm sure you're very aware, is that there's that late stage and grade of presentation, especially among our women when it comes to cancer. Could you speak to the importance of early detection, and how was your detection made?
Well, okay, before I answer that question, when I was diagnosed, of course, there's the whole history that they take. What's your medical history like? And when I explained about my first diagnosis all those years ago, there was some debate or conclusion that the radiation that I had received all those 20 plus years ago could have triggered my second cancer, my breast cancer, because it's not unknown or it's not unusual for radiation to stimulate, all kinds of things that secondary cancers, secondary cancer. Yeah, a new cancer or even a recurrence, but in this case, it was a new cancer. So they were not that surprised. So I said, so I'd gone to see I'd gone for a medical checkup because I was planning for my 50th birthday. So during the checkup, my doctor told me that I was not aware, I had not felt anything in my breast. But, when they do the scans and they check, they found that there was a lump.
Wow.
And
So one of the, one of the issues we're also having, because some cancers have that strong familial link, like breast cancer, prostate cancer, but we don't have our history. Prior to that time, did you know about your family history? Was it something that was discussed? Or this was just came out of the left field for you?
Yes, I knew a little bit from both sides of my family. I knew my father's father, my paternal grandfather, died of prostate cancer the same year I was born. And then the firstborn in my father's family, my uncle, my father's brother, died of prostate cancer. That I knew. And then on my mother's side, her maternal aunt, her mother's sister, had breast cancer. And on my mother's side again, in that same family where my grandmother's sister had breast cancer, an aunt of mine gave birth to a child who later developed leukemia, cancer of the blood. So that I knew, I knew there was some history of cancer in my family. But really, in my immediate family, I'm the only one who had cancer. And my aunts, my mother is an only child. My mother, nothing. My father's family, it's just my
uncles,
uncle, my father's, my father's firstborn, my father's elder brother, who had prostate cancer. And in my father's family, there were 9. There were 9, and none of them had cancer. So in the family, I'm really one of the few who has been diagnosed with cancer.
Well, I mean, it's good that you're at least able to know your family history, because we don't share that a lot as Africans. And which kind of brings me to my next question. Again, like I said, I work with people who have survived prostate cancer, and there's a theme that goes around shame. From the point of diagnosis, even up until when they traverse the survivorship continuum. But a few of them break through that barrier. They turn from survivors to advocates, kind of like yourself. As someone who's gone through this journey, why do you think there's a lot of shame associated with cancer in our community as Africans?
Well, I think number one, talking about an illness, a chronic illness, which is harsh, and which, in terms of its treatment, and even first of all, in terms of its treatment, that's a problem. And, it's a lifelong condition. Even when you're cured, there is always that risk that it may come back. That's number one. And then there's a lot of death associated with cancer, the cancer diagnosis. Long, painful death or a short, painful death, but there's a lot of death and pain associated with it. And also the treatments, we go back to the treatments, some of the side effects of the treatments are not pleasant and have got long-lasting implications. For example, breast cancer. In the event that you have to lose your breast, breasts don't grow back. Yes, you can have reconstruction, but how many people have access to reconstruction? Yeah. So you lose a body part like a breast, which isn't it? It's perceived to be part of a woman's femininity. Now, when you lose one breast or you lose both breasts, that already can, there's already an image problem, and then stigma comes in so many ways. Secondly, it's been known, the treatments have been known to affect fertility, affect libido, your whole, there are a lot of physical changes, and it can I've talked about infertility. It can induce premature menopause, and again, there is a lot of silence and myths and misconceptions. So there are myths such as you brought it upon yourself, so you are to blame, or it's a curse. There's witchcraft involved, and this, so there's a lot of negativity associated with the disease, and therefore the stigma. Plus, depending on where it is, where the cancer has been found, right? Breast cancer, talking about breast cancer is hard enough, but what about if you start talking about penile cancer? Where do you even start?
Prostate cancer.
That's sexuality, the trans organ cancer. Yeah, prostate cancer. Or penile cancer, cancer of the penis. I'm talking about. Penile. It's cancer of the cervix. Where is the cervix? By the time you start explaining, you have to
draw a picture, maybe.
The bush. If that's not bad enough, if you have cancer of the vulva. How are you going to explain that I've got cancer of the vulva? Cancer of the what? Of the uterus. I think it's easy. I don't know if it's easier, but if mentioning cancer of the eye, we can see that. If you're going into the sexual organs, it becomes more and more difficult. I mean, even the breast, we have to be sensitive. Yeah. And maybe you don't have a breast, you don't have a breast, and they're trying not to look at your chest. Yes,
because when you see a woman, the first thing that people will stare at is, it's just right there, right? And then once that is gone, I imagine it's difficult.
Right.
Oh wow.
Yes, and you can imagine more. And of course, we would like to have breasts, nice breasts, healthy breasts. That's important. It's part of a woman's image, it's part of woman's, sexuality, sensuality. Now, you can imagine a young lady, even an older one, but I'm giving an example of a young lady, 20s. I mean, whereby she's single, no child. When she wants to start dating, how does the conversation even start? Even for an older woman, not it's any easier. But you can imagine. Already that you have one breast, it can be a barrier. We know of several cases, many cases, if I may say so, where marriages have broken down because the husband does not understand breast cancer and why his wife should only have one breast. That doesn't work for him. For example, there's a case where a woman was told to choose between the marriage or her breast. And in this particular case, she chose her health really, not just the breast, it's her health, and the marriage came to an end. And that story is not unique. So you can imagine, even that's why the stigma. Now you've got the lump. What will happen? What will my husband think? What will my husband's family think? So let me just, lay low and not deal with this lump or this discharge or any other abnormal symptoms.
Thank you. Thank you so much for just explaining that. It makes a lot of sense. So the first stint to cancer was when you were in your 20s, and then at the point of turning 50, like 27 years later, another one came. And I imagine the setting was different, the state was different. You're probably in a different walk of life at the later stage. How would you compare and contrast those two experiences? And what would you say were some protective factors and some not so protective factors if we were to compare when you had in your 20s and then when you had in your 50s?
Mm-hmm. In my 20s, as I said, it was a new experience, cancer, okay, and then this is the treatment. And I didn't know what to expect, so everything was new. And because I was not in the loop, on the one hand, it helped because I was just, going through, they say, do this, do that. I'm not anticipating, the pain that's going to come, the nausea, because I wasn't expecting that until it happened. And being naive, or maybe naive is not the right word, but not being in the loop about the gravity of the disease. I think it helped me just go through it, day in, day out, waiting for the final day when I will no longer be on treatment and I'm done. And I'm done. So in that regard, it helped my ignorance, if I may call it, about the gravity of the situation. Because I never really spoke about death. Yeah, maybe because I was I think, in West Germany, that time it was West Germany. I think initially in Zambia, that was spoken a little bit because I was advised to speak to my employers to send me to Germany because we didn't have
infrastructure,
much cancer treatment here. So it's like, okay, and then I was sent abroad. So then I recovered. And as I said, we didn't talk about death much because I think also in Germany, they were on top of things in terms of early stage Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I recovered. So fast forward to 2015. Now, I knew about breast cancer, maybe not in that much detail as I was not a breast cancer survivor. But I knew it wasn't going to be an easy journey. I already knew it. And in fact, the day I was told I had breast cancer, the memories of my first cancer just came flooding back.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, because one difficult thing about my first treatment was the chemotherapy. I was in a lot of pain, my stomach, nausea. It was very, very painful. Now, at least now, and I know I'm dealing with a different cancer, but the side effects of my treatment were much, much milder than what I first went through, which was a pleasant stuff. It was pleasant. And I was an outpatient, so that helped. And I could speak with more authority and ask questions and be more involved with my own recovery because I'm older and I've been through it and being an advocate as well. That helped as well. So in that regard, but what I found interestingly enough was very difficult compared to the first time was my relationship with God, my spirituality. With my first cancer, I really drew closer to God. With my second cancer, I rebelled.
It's understandable.
Yes. I said to God, what's up with this second cancer? I'm busy with my advocacy work, which I can't do now much of. I'm now fighting for my life again. And I said, I've spent the better part of my life ducking and diving this disease one way or the other. And the work that I do is my calling, that I know for sure. And I couldn't just understand why cancer had come back. And I say, especially in my Jubilee year, but in which year, any year is a bad year when cancer comes.
There's no perfect year for cancer.
Exactly. So it took me a while, and I just withdrew, and I became depressed, actually. For maybe 5-6 months. Outwardly, you would think I'm the same old person, but inwardly, I battled, and until eventually I came to terms with the situation, and started counting my blessings one by one. That was caught early. I had access to treatment. I was knowledgeable about the disease. I was comfortable, in my home. There are a lot of things to be grateful for. So I just had to ask God for His forgiveness and reconnect with Him.
He understood all those times because it's still part of the journey. And I also imagine that the time between the first cancer and the second cancer had spanned about 3 decades. Advancements in treatment modalities also probably made for a much more pleasant experience than the first time you had it. Yeah.
100%.
Sorry, 1 second. Arifa, mommy's on the phone, okay? I'll come, okay? Mommy's having a meeting. Sorry, 1 second. Yes. Go lie down, take a nap, okay? Alright? Mommy's recording. Alright, give mommy about 20 minutes, okay? Here. Okay. There we go. All done? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Alright, I'll be back soon, okay? Alright, sorry about that. So, one of the things I've observed in working with, and by the way, thanks for that response. I think it's very encouraging to just hear your experience that in the midst of things, the difficult times you had and the struggles, but at the end of the day, you found meaning in your experience. And I think ultimately that's a lesson in life, that sometimes we'll come through challenges. What will make it better is to find the meaning behind it, right? And so thanks for that reminder. Now, one of the things I've observed in working in the community with cancer survivors is there are 2 broad categories of survivors. For those who have survived, and that's a very wonderful thing that they survived it. But there are those that move from survivorship to advocates, because there's that burning desire in them. I don't want people to go through what I went through. It's not saying that one of them is better than the other. If you stopped at survivor only, that's okay. It's very understandable. Not everybody has the emotional or physical bandwidth to move to advocate. But there are people like you, people who, you found it as a life mission to keep, bringing the community together. Take, for example, your work in the Zambian Cancer Society, which I think is amazing. I would explore that towards the end. You do help promotions, you do patient support, you do community outreaches. At what point did you go from just being a survivor to being an advocate, which I think is really, really amazing?
Found myself in advocacy. I certainly didn't apply to be an advocate, and I always felt not always, but for a long time, I felt I was the least likely candidate to do advocacy. And when you talk about survivorship, or let me just say in cancer space, or at least for the Zambian Cancer Society, a survivor is a person who has been diagnosed with cancer up to the end of life. So that's how we look at it. I know some people say, no, I'm not a survivor, I'm a patient and so on. But, well, as we say, as long as we haven't died yet, whether it's from cancer or anything else, we're survivors. Now, my step into advocacy work, when I came back from my diplomatic tour, that was like 11 years later, I came back and I was now at a point of thinking, what's next with my life? And I think it's because of coming back to Zambia, where the whole cancer story started. It made me start to reflect and think about what cancer had done to my life, and a lot of positive things, but there were a lot of negative things that I went through, personal things. It's physically, there were challenges. Relationship-wise, there were challenges. And, I just began to say, I would like... In fact, I think my words to my friend was, to a good friend of mine was, I'm going to get even with cancer. I want to, going to get even. And those were not, it was not a good way to start. And I'll explain why. But at that time, I thought, yes, going to get to get even. How? I said I wanted to make a difference. So let me see how I can go about helping cancer patients. And I was led to an organization which at that time just supported children with cancer, but it was a starting point. And the chairperson of that organization, it's no longer in existence, but at that time, it was chaired by a eminent doctor. In fact, he was a professor since passed, who was my doctor before I left. And I thought, right. So I joined this organization, and we would fundraise maybe once or twice a year, 2 or 3 times, to raise funds to buy drugs for children with cancer. And I'm talking about 2000, the year 2000, and in fact 2001. And at that time, there was still no cancer hospital. The cancer hospital started in 2006. And through it, so 2001, 2, 3, 4, as we're heading to 2006, 2007, I would occasionally hear a voice, a prompting to say, set up your own organization. Set up your own organization. As far as I'm concerned, that was the Holy Spirit speaking to me. And I would answer that. And in fact, when I got this, sorry, I'm going to go back a bit. When I got this desire to make a difference and to get even with cancer, I asked God if he wanted me to help, if he wanted me to set up my own cancer organization. Because as I was talking about getting even, my friend said, why don't you set up your own cancer organization? And I said, okay. And it really touched me. And I asked God, do you want me to set up one? And he showed me very clearly that he wanted me to. So very briefly, I know you're going to do the editing, as you wrap up this. A few days after my conversation with my friend, and as I was ranting and raving about this cancer and so on, a few days later, I went to visit my brother, a brother of mine, and I was reading one of the local newspapers. And on the front cover, there was wording, and it said, a headline, and it said, cancer patients need your help.
Wow. And
this was the Zambia Daily Mail, in case there are Zambians who will listen to this. Yes, go to page 4 or 5, or I can't remember which page now. I wish I'd kept that newspaper, but I didn't. So what did I do, Mo? Instead of going to that page immediately, I was shaken and I was scared.
That's a sign right there.
So I read the first page, second, third, fourth, until I went to that page. Exactly. And he talked about this cancer organization, and that's how I ended up working with them as a volunteer.
To learn the ropes.
But this prompting kept on and on. Yes. And I said to God, the reason I asked if you wanted me to set up my own cancer organization is because I did not know one existed. Since there's one, why should I set up my own? I mean, it doesn't make sense. But that prompting would come maybe 2-3 times a year, not very often. And that was how I would respond until in 2009. And by that time, I'd left in 2007, 2008, I'd left that organization I was volunteering with. I just felt moved to move on, compelled to move on. I wanted to do more for cancer patients, not just for the children. And in 2009, more believe it or not, and this is a true story, as I was sitting in my office, I work with my brother, and he's very much into corporate business. I heard the voice again asking me, what is stopping you from setting up the Zambian Cancer Society? By that time, I already had the name, and I was a little bit online, but not really, and wasn't formally registered. And I had no answer. And I said nothing, just to myself, because first of all, I mused over it for like a minute or two. Then I said, there's no reason. So I got up and I said, no, but before I get up and speak to my brother in his office, how am I going to fund this? How am I going to, because I need help. What do I do? And I need a helper. So the answer was, and how am I going to pay them what? Because I don't even have any, there's no money.
Yeah.
This organization hasn't even been founded or set up. And the answer was your tithe. And I said,
wow.
okay. I'm telling you, and I've got a niece. She's a pastor. The jury is still out in her interview. In fact, she says, no, it's supposed contribution. It cannot be your tithe. I said, that is what I heard. And not only did I hear that, okay, after I heard that, I went to my brother and I told him that this is what I've decided to do, to set up the Zambian Cancer Society to help cancer patients. And his answer was, how are you going to fund it? He asked me that question, which I just asked the Holy Spirit a few minutes ago. And I said, through my tithe. Then he said, oh, okay. And then, because I wasn't sure whether I'd heard the Holy Spirit correctly, I said, shouldn't I touch my tithe? I said, God, if I have misunderstood you and I shouldn't use my tithe, I actually said to him, slap me so hard such that I know that I am not supposed to touch my tithe. I should give it to my church. That's what I said. Otherwise, I'm going to tithe. I'm going to use my tithe. And I've not received that slap yet.
Wow.
But of course, I've moved on from giving my tithe to the organization. But I've moved on. But that's how it started. Yeah, and my advocacy progressed. But I wanted to come back to when I said I had the wrong motivation in a way.
Getting even with cancer.
Yeah, I said fighting cancer. Exactly. Getting even, and then I'm using my own personal experience, of course, to help other cancer patients ultimately. But then I was one day when I was praying, and the Holy Spirit asked me a question. And the question was, do you know why you have, and it's like maybe 2-3 years later, do you know why you have never fully embraced the Zambian Cancer Society?
Wow. And
my answer was no. And the reply was, because you associated with pain, with loss, with grieving. I said yes. The true story more, I know it may say wow. And that is when I realized, that I had said it was the wrong motive. Yes, wanting to help, but being driven by the wrong emotions, which had that negative vibe. And the moment I realized that, I let go of, the hurts and the disappointments and the pain and, the loss. And I said, okay, let me look at things differently and look at it from a positive perspective. So that is what has helped me throughout the years.
It's what an unconventional story. But thank you so much for your candor and responding to that question. I'll be remiss not to ask you these following questions, especially about the infrastructure in Africa. I know I'm Nigerian. You're from Zambia. And I think there's just some trends in how. So I'll just use Nigeria for example, because I guess it might be quite applicable to Zambia. We've done not so much of a good job in curbing, fighting a lot of communicable diseases in the past, 50 years, like HIV, and let's just even call some other ones like malaria. And I think that has put a stress on our already weakened health infrastructure, right? And this is what you see in a lot of developing countries are some of the ailments we are plagued with. But because we tend to be living longer and quality of life overall has, improved in areas of the world, including African countries. But what that means is that with longer lives, we're seeing more prevalent rates of cancers especially in the younger demographic. And it's usually the aggressive forms, like a triple negative. And it just, it's scary to me. And so my question is this: without organizations like yours, who has to fill in the cracks in the system? Because what you're doing right now is what a government apparatus should be doing. But again, we know NGOs, they really form the being of, they fill in a lot of the spots there. What are some of the opportunities for governments to work hand in hand? Because I remember your episode with Chulu. Again, shout out to Chulu, where I met you from. You talked about how the distance people have to travel to go get medications and to go get treated. And that was very, very bothersome for you. And because I imagine your experience going to Germany and the privilege you had probably also helped you really understand the challenge it might be for people that might not even have those kind of luxuries. So I guess my questions for you, for maybe those that might be listening, who might be in the form of authority, to kind of do something, in what kind of ways would you say they can work better in improving cancer outcomes in Africa? Because the sad thing is that I think we haven't gotten to the end of it. It's probably going to get worse as far as the rates that we're seeing.
Sure, 100%. And thanks for that very deep question. And you're very right, Mo. A healthy nation is very important, and the health of its citizens really is the responsibility of the government overall, to make sure that we have access to treatment, that the environment is conducive, the job opportunity. There's economic growth, because some of these diseases, really, poverty is very much rooted and grounded in them. And the Nigerian experience is typical for many African countries, I'm sure, Zambia being one of them. One thing I'd like to say first is, I've been sharing my story and talked about not having a cancer hospital until 2006. And I've often said that setting up that cancer hospital for me was one of the greatest things that the government of the day did. Because without that, I think myself and I know many others probably wouldn't be alive today, because we have access to treatment. Yes, there are challenges at the cancer hospital, but at least there is one, and it's a starting point. Over the last couple of years, I know there have been challenges. COVID didn't help, but overall, I think government's priority towards cancer care was diverted to other things. But now, slowly, we are improving, and cancer care is now getting the attention that it deserves. Now, in terms of non-communicable diseases, cancers, and other things, I firmly believe that even us as citizens, we need to take responsibility for our own health. These are lessons that you learn the hard way once we are hit with cancer, we're hit with diabetes, or we're hit with hypertension. But I think it's important government also has deliberate programs to promote health and wellness. Yeah. Prevention is very, very important. That's number one. And, looking at health holistically, our health system right now are just made or modeled to treat disease.
Prevent,
not about especially not about preventing and treating it in a hospital or clinical setting, not knowing that it can also be managed or treated in the home, and not necessarily like injections or what, but just the whole wellness of a person in the community. You're talking about the spiritual aspect, the physical aspect, the emotional aspect, the support groups, or the support, not necessarily groups, but the support system in homes. Exactly. If your home is broken, how are you going to get better, and recover from whether it's cancer or diabetes, hypertension, or these other diseases? So I believe that governments should redefine the way they treat patients, that redefine health or redefine illness and focus more on wellness and look at it holistically. So even the trainings that the medical health practitioners get, they look at patients holistically, and promote health and wellness, not just how the side effects. Here's something for the nausea, not asking about my financial status, my relationship status, spiritual. We just have to become more creative and look at it from that aspect. And then, of course, governments, cannot do everything. That's when you bring in the NGOs, you bring in the whether it's the church. I know not everybody goes to
church,
praise. It's a Christian, faith-based. You look into that element. You look into the environment. So all these, ministries of health really have to start looking at their citizens from a holistic point of view and not just merely treating the disease.
Yeah. And I think you're so right. Like promoting a more of a wellness model rather than an illness model. And it's an all hands on deck approach. And thanks for that reminder of taking personal responsibility. Because I imagine for you, if you hadn't gone for your checkup, I bet your stage will have been way more advanced than it was. And so we need to not just rely on, and I know as Africans, we tend to be more spiritual and more religious. You can actually have both, get your health checks. That 1 year you miss might make a lot of difference in your health outcomes. And for most cancers these days, with the level of sophistication we have in treatment and just managing an overall 5-year survival, most of them have like at least 70% or more odds of surviving if you're detected early. So early detection is key. Everyone listening to this, go get your health checkup. Peace of mind, nothing like peace of mind. There's no premium price on peace of mind. Now, as we wind off, I wanted to ask you this question about just one of the themes that kind of recurs in my conversations. Mommy's on the phone. On one of the themes that comes up is that fear of recurrence, right? And like you said before, with primary cancers, there's risk of secondary cancers. What fears, if any, have you harbored about maybe just coming back in another form? And if you've had those fears, what keeps you going without succumbing to the fear?
Well, I live with that knowing hovering over my head that the cancer, one breast cancer may come back, or I may not have another type of cancer. My experience with these two cancers, I think this has come to the fore because I had my breast cancer after my Hodgkin's lymphoma. And, as each year came and went, the whole idea of actually having a second cancer was far removed from my, from my vocabulary or from my radar. And now breast cancer is visited me. So I don't take anything for granted. But it doesn't make it any easier. In fact, it makes it even worse to a certain degree. Any lump, bump, I freak out, and I just have to exhale and tell myself, have it checked. And also, believe it or not, more, because I've had so many surgeries, I've had duct and type cancer, as I said, for over 30 years now. I'm beginning to lean very much towards the body healing itself. I'm delving into it more and more and looking at what is possible. I am a very firm believer in conventional medicine, 100%. It has saved my life. But I think I must also develop more curiosity about how adaptive the body is, how strong it is, and how it is able to heal itself. And so that moving forward is what I really want to go into the whole health and wellness. Spontaneous remissions are not that uncommon. The more I read about it and do my research, and I love that angle. And I'm not, as I said, certainly would never discuss conventional medicine, but I need to be more proactive about my own health and believe number one, that the body can heal itself, and know that I dig deep into my being, and and other pillars in place, and then I believe I'm protected.
I mean,
Let's put it that way.
I hear this a lot. And I think it's a form of coping, knowing that with cancer, you lose control.
Mm-hmm.
A form of gaining that control back is knowing that, okay, if I take care of my health, do my workout, eat the right things, maybe I'm able to at least protect myself to a certain degree. And I see that a lot. So, man, it's not uncommon to hear that with the lot of survivors. It's your way of just knowing that I have a bit of control over this issue if I do it this way and that way. But you know what? Whatever comes your way, I know you have the ability to fight it because you've proven that to keep thriving in whatever capacity you are in. So, I have no worries with that. Mm-hmm. Now, so we know that some cancers have that strong familial link. Do you have kids, Ma? Do you have kids? You have daughters? You have sons?
I don't have any biological children.
All right. Okay. I'd ask that because I know that you knew your family history, but what we find in a lot of African homes that we don't tell our progenies about those susceptibility of risks when it comes to cancers. Now, just finally, 2 months ago, because it's December now, we brought a young lady on the podcast. She's in her 30s. She just actually had one breast removed, and she's geared to begin chemotherapy soon. For people like her who are listening to this, and she's based in Nigeria, we had to actually do crowdfunding for her to be able to get funding for her treatment. You find that very applicable because our healthcare infrastructure, the insurance systems, even though she has insurance, they said they don't cover cancers, which kind of still blows my mind, Yeah. And she works for a healthcare organization. Her insurance told her we don't cover cancer. They only cover malaria. It's just mind blowing to me. But that aside, for people like that who might be listening to this, what kind of words of encouragement would you give them as a veteran, as an advocate, as an ally to keep them going on their journey?
Sure. One of the things which us in the cancer space found ironic, for some of us at least, when COVID hit, we heard a lot about the new normal. And I don't know if you heard that in in the States.
It was a buzzword. It was the word of the year.
Exactly, yes. For us, it was ironic because once you are diagnosed, you now have to adjust to the new normal. Is never the same, certainly. And I mean, dealing with cancer, we're not going to downplay it. It's a big journey, certainly is. And what I would encourage her to do is, one, is to be able to share with people whom she trusts what it is that she's going through. There are times, I've heard it often, and people told me that be strong, be strong. Yes, it's important to encourage, but there is also what they call toxic positivity, where you are not being true to yourself when you're having a bad day. There are ups and downs in a journey. It is a journey, and it's really to deal with things one day at a time, one step at a time. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of women who have been diagnosed with breast cancer and who have survived. And, we look to them and we're encouraged by that. So you've said you have raised some money for her to access drugs.
Yeah.
So we are grateful for that.
Oh.
So gratitude also is very important, and it brings that thankfulness and gratitude. It brings out these positive vibes, which are very, very important when it comes to healing.
Yes.
So yes, yeah, and I know it's not so easy, especially when you're not having a great day to find something to be grateful for. Yeah. But I encourage her.
Okay.
To remember these words and to try and find at least one thing. And also, the way how one can boost one's own immunity. There are things like exercise, even if it's walking 2-3 steps a day. Exercise has been proven to one. It's proven to improve outcomes in terms of side effects.
Yes.
You have less harsh side effects. In terms of surgeries, you have quicker recovery. In terms of recurrence, it helps to diminish the chances of recurrence. So there are a lot of positives about being physically active according to the way you are feeling. So I would encourage her to be physically active regularly as much as she can, and as she undergoes her journey. Also, in terms of healthy diet, I'm sure she can speak to a nutritionist or find a nutritionist who can speak to her about what to eat. Also, the support system is important, and not support system is not just your family, not just your relatives. Family can be friends. It's also helpful if you have a supportive medical team. I know sometimes you don't have the luxury of choosing whom, but if you can identify somebody, sometimes it may even be outside the core medical team because, it just doesn't work. But maybe you have a GP or a friend who is a medical person, but that support system from a medical person who will be able to hold your hand and understand it from that perspective. Really, really, 100%. It really helps.
Thank you.
I think those relationships are very, very important. And keeping your emotions, yourself as happy as you can helps as well. And we are here. We have walked the journey and still walking it. Just that we are at this stage, so she surround herself with positivity. That is also helpful.
Thank you so much. I cannot even wait to share this episode with her. Finally, one of the theories in cancer survivorship is reframing, where there's that response shift in your perspective. And I think you alluded to that when you talked about when you're planning for your 50th birthday, the moment that diagnosis came, it wasn't important anymore. And I can imagine that was a big deal because, 50 is a big deal. In just the perspective changes you've had, if you could go back again and do things differently when it comes to your cancer survivorship journey, are there any things you would have done differently?
I would have been more into my own self-care. I think a lot of times I have put myself last, no more. I would have been more curious about life, about living, about exploring new things. I think I was too much with the same old. To a certain degree, I'm a creative type, but I think I could have pushed myself more. Maybe because being in the diplomatic service, I tended to be accommodating of a lot of things which now I wouldn't accommodate, maybe commanding my space more and saying, no, this doesn't work, I'm not accepting this. But maybe me being too accepting and being too diplomatic. So there's a lot of self-care I would have done and had more exciting and I had a more exciting agenda. In terms of self-care, in terms of my health, I would have been more conscious about my spirituality, be more intentional about my physical, being physically active. I am, but not consistently, off on. I would have been more physically consistent. And with certain things where I'm not happy in a situation, whether it's work-wise or relationship-wise with friends or relatives or others, I would probably have dealt with them more or quicker rather than let things fester and drag on. I think ultimately, what am I saying at the end of the day? I think self-care is very important. I would have,
and I think that's what we can all take something from that, regardless of our status. We can all take something, just a reminder to put ourselves first, and it's not selfishness; it's just putting ourselves first. Wow, I could just keep talking, to you on and on because your insight and just your in depth about the things you've gone through and not just holding back. You just want to make sure that people have it easier than you did has just been very, very refreshing to hear. And I thank you so much for your time. For those who might want to learn more about your work, how can they find you, ma?
Oh, sure. I don't know how. I know I'm on social media. At Udie Soko, I think it is all the social media.
Just Google her. She's only Udie Soko. Yes, Google her. Yes.
Or through the Zambia Cancer Society.
Yes.
You'll certainly find me through the Facebook
so it's
as well. I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So if they would like to reach out, they are more than welcome.
Yeah, and I'll put all those links in the comments. In the show notes. And I see that you're also a Toastmasters. I am a Toastmasters as well. You were the founding member of Eagles Toastmasters? Yeah. That's really amazing. I'm a DTM, actually, before we did the path. I'm a Toastmasters, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's very good.
I haven't done because they've shifted to pathways. Yeah, I never got. Yeah,
yes, they have.
I was one of the last DTMs. I'm like, I'm done with this one, and I'm just gonna sit it out for a while. But it's good to see a fellow Toastmasters. Well,
that's right. Okay. Good.
Thank you so much for your time, and I will let you know once the episode comes out. I'll share with you the flyers and all of the media. Feel free to repurpose them. And I love your Facebook page. I loved what you guys did for Duku October. I didn't know about the headgear. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. Yes. And for those that might be wondering why we didn't go into some questions, again, I met her through Chulu, another podcaster. So you have to go listen to that episode to kind of fill in the gaps in our conversation, because this was more of a continuation, and I wanted to find a better way to use her time than to ask her the same question she's been asked by other podcasters. Well, I hope you enjoyed the rest of your Saturday, and I hope to bring you back sometime soon. I don't know in what capacity, but I'll look forward to our conversation in the future if that were to happen again.
All right. Thank you so much, Mo. I've had a wonderful time with you, and I'm looking forward to listening to watching the podcast,
yes.
Being on your show.
Thank you. Have a good day, man.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. That was just the podcast episode with Ms. Soko. I mean, just how refreshing. So, of course, if you're listening to this, I hope you're able to get some good tips from just Ms. Soko about how to thrive in this new phase of life that you're in. As you know, we're cheering you on. Kosi, you've got this, and cannot wait to see you on the other side of what recovery will look like for you. In any event, thank you all for listening to this episode. We hope you take this as your sign. So Miss Udie talked about the signs in starting her NGO. This is your sign to go get your health checked, okay? If you're waiting for a sign, this is it. Go make that appointment. Go explore what that pain that is bothering you. I'm not trying to sound like a pastor right now, but this is your sign to go get your health checked, okay? Peace of mind is very, very premium. And for most of these diseases, the earlier they are detected, the better your outcomes. I need you alive. We need you alive. Love you guys, and catch you on another episode of the More Sibyl podcast. I remain your host, More Sibyl. Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Sibyl podcast. Well, guess what? There's plenty more where that came from. So visit our website at www.mosibyl.com. That is www.moresibyl.com, where you can find hours of other binge-worthy episodes just like this one. And while you're at it, please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Podbean, as it encourages other awesome people like you to listen to the podcast as well. We are now officially on Podbean. It has an app. You can catch up on missed episodes and also get a notification when we have new episodes. Do you have a question for our guest, feedback on the episode, or a suggestion for a future guest? Then please get in touch with us by sending us an email at talktomo@moresibyl.com or connect with us via Instagram at the More Sibyl podcast. Cannot wait to hear from you, and thank you so much for always listening.